Hello and welcome to Long Beach Lens. I'm your host, Derek J. Simpson, Executive Director of the Long Beach Community Action Partnership. Today, our guest is the Senior Vice President and Partner for Getty Images Latin America. Please help me welcome Mónica Taher.
Thank you, Derek.
How are you?
I'm doing fine, and you?
Good, good.
Thank you for the invitation.
Oh, it was my pleasure. I mean, as I was joking with you before when we met, you were the silent one and your partner was doing all the talking. So,
that is true.
So hopefully we make it through this interview.
Absolutely, we will.
There you go. So I was intrigued as I did the research about you because there's so many facets of Mónica. And to start, it talked about you being a serial tech entrepreneur and accelerate with Google Academy. What is that all about?
Well, it's actually pretty simple. Being a serial entrepreneur basically means that you have a lot of businesses that you're focusing on. Okay. And in my case, I specifically work in tech. And that means that I have one main business, which is Getty Images Latin America. It happens to be a company that distributes digital content. That is footage, music, photos. It can be editorial, news, sports, and entertainment, and it can also be stock photography. So all the photos that you see in advertising campaigns, on billboards. Let's say you go around the city of Long Beach and you see a huge billboard of a Latino family at the dinner table. That's stock photography. Or it can also be a photo shoot that we did for a brand, for a client. So that's what Getty Images Latin America does. I'm also in the process of launching another startup, which is called Clipyap. And it's basically a company that will utilize GIFs, those photos that move really quick, with classic movie lines or TV show lines, such as, let's say, Terminator's famous line, "I'll be back." So that specific app is for kids, the younger millennials. They're called Generation Z. And the ones that
we've gone there now.
Right?
Okay, I knew about millennials. I didn't know about Z. Okay.
It's Generation Z. Right. And they range between ages of 12 to 17, and they're known for using not necessarily Facebook anymore, but they're focusing on Snapchat, they're focusing on Twitter, Instagram, all of those social media platforms where their parents and grandparents might not be in. Because if we look at Facebook, we're seeing that the largest and fastest demographic ranges between the ages of 50 and 55. It's not necessarily younger people anymore. Okay. So all of these millennials and Generation Z kids have migrated into these platforms. Hence why I want to launch Clipyap, which is this app that will basically allow kids to communicate with these photos, with movie lines.
Okay. Now, how did you come to understand it to the depths that you just explained it? Was this something that you were already in the industry and you sort of evolved with it, or you've done research? I mean, this is interesting to us because, for instance, here at PadNet TV, you can watch us on local channel 32, Charter 41, Verizon. But many people do video on demand, and so they reach us via the internet, and we look at how many hits we get on our website, etc. How did you get so astute and interested in this as well?
That is a great question. I really have an interesting story to tell, a personal story. And actually, when you were mentioning this at the beginning of the show, I can refer viewers to monicataher.com, which is my personal blog and website, where they can read my story. I actually had to, in what we can describe as a colloquial term, I had to hit rock bottom for me to come back from the ashes and actually focus on launching a business that could help me survive. That's the way I see it. I have a 17-year-old daughter who's in high school and about to apply to college. And I spend a lot of time with her and with her friends, and I try to listen and to pay attention to what platforms they're using and what they're talking about, that in order for me to come up with ideas and try to launch a startup such as Clipyap. But to answer your question more in depth, you could see on my website that I basically describe the fact that I used to be with a partner. I am gay, and I was with her for 13 years. And it was, at the end, it was a very sad story because she suffered a midlife crisis, left, And it left me in a place where I needed to scramble in order to save my home. After enjoying the luxury of having two incomes, I found myself just with one salary at that time. I didn't have a business, and I needed to not just save my homes, keep paying the mortgage, but I also needed to put food on the table for my daughter. So I started reading and reading and researching, and the more I clicked, the more I learned. And I started embracing technology because I understood even back then, and I'm talking about 2011, just a few years ago, that is really the future. Technology, especially for women, and mostly when you launch a business as a woman, you are paving the path for financial freedom. And that's why I advocate on my blog and any message that I communicate that women absolutely need to have their own business if they want to succeed in life.
Now, going back to Getty Images Latin America, now this existed prior to you, or was it something with the Latin America edge that you created? What was your role in that piece?
So Getty Images is an international company.
Right.
It's been out there since the beginning of the 90s, in the 90s. And it has an amazing branding. It has a great reputation, and they were actually the first ones to take photos into the digital space. Right. Before, if you worked in design or if you needed photos for anything, you would get CDs basically and grab the photos from those CDs. There was nothing on the web. So Getty Images did that. And then a few years later, they saw the need to tap into the US Hispanic market as well as into Latin America. There is a lot of, I don't need to tell you or our viewers that the U.S. Hispanic market is, $1 trillion. There's a lot of money to access there. So Getty saw that opportunity, and the partners at Getty Images Latin America now decided that it was a fantastic idea to launch a different entity that could still be affiliated to Getty Images International, but could focus only on these markets. And that's how it came about.
Right, and it was a perfect fit for you.
It was an amazing fit for me, but at the same time, it allowed me to solve the problem that I was just telling you about with my personal story.
Right. Now, when you, I was looking also and read about the fact that you were involved with efforts that caused giants such as Univision and Telemundo to make some changes based on the lifestyle that you mentioned as well. Can you share that story?
Sure, absolutely. And I'm just going to say that it's not necessarily a lifestyle, it's really a sexual orientation or a gender identity. And what I'm doing here right now is exactly what I used to do with Univision and Telemundo. Sometimes we just say things not because we want to act out of malice, but it's just because we don't have, we just don't have the necessary information or education per se in order to refer to issues that affect the LGBT community or lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community. So I used to work for the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, which is called GLAD. And it's a similar situation to what I'm comparable to where I'm at with Getty right now in terms of that I saw an opportunity and I observed that they were not necessarily working with Spanish language media. Mind you, GLAD is an organization, it's a nonprofit organization that educates the media on how to talk about LGBT issues. But back then, and I'm talking about probably 2002, 2003, they were only working in the general market. There was not any media training being conducted on behalf of Spanish language media. And I started working for them, and I saw that there was this disparity. In English language media, even back then, you wouldn't hear pejoratives or you wouldn't hear, let's call them bad words, right? But in Spanish language media, they were, even these big networks were getting away with saying those words and just talking about LGBT people with a lot of stereotypes just because. So I spoke up within the organization and I suggested that we definitely needed a program that could focus on Spanish language media, just because of the fact that at least back then there were about 45 million Latinos that were being affected by this, by all of this content. And on top of that, at that time, 60% of all the content that Latinos were watching on Univision and Telemundo was coming from Mexico. And that also meant that there were more stereotypes and there were many, many more bad words that we needed to eradicate. So we started setting up meetings with Univision, Telemundo, even Televisa in Mexico City. Televisa is the largest TV content producer in the world for Spanish speakers. And at first they didn't understand what we were trying to do. You know, nobody had set up a meeting to talk to them about LGBT issues. You know, the gay thing was still a taboo. And the more work we did with them, the more we were able to educate them. And we did the same thing with news media rooms such as La Opinión, the newspaper, and El Diario La Prensa in New York, and many, many other media outlets across the country. So the bottom line here is that we were able to eradicate words that are absolutely, absolutely denigrating against, or in this case, for LGBT people.
Now, when you fast forward to today, how do you feel about the way things have progressed as a result of your efforts and others like you?
I think it's been about 10 years since we did that work with Univision, and we were able to even erase a lot of the pejoratives that were being used, even in comedy sketches. And I'm very proud of the work that we did as an organization, and just to see, for example, that we now have same-sex marriage at the federal level, when 10 years ago we wouldn't even have thought about it. It's just a huge win. It just shows that we are evolving as a society.
Yeah. As I sit here listening to you, I mean, you speak with such passion, and you're very knowledgeable about all of these subjects, which I'm assuming your days begin and end with a lot in between in terms of your schedule being packed most days, I would imagine, right?
It's a little bit hectic. I'm not going to deny that.
Especially raising a daughter as
exactly,
well.
Exactly. And I'm very fortunate that my daughter is just a great girl. She's very studious, very disciplined, but there's a lot going on every day just because you have to be active on social media, and if tech is what I do for a living, I need to be visible.
Well, speaking of visible, we're going to take a quick break and come back. We're enjoying this conversation with Mónica Taher. Stay tuned for more of Long Beach Lens.
Artful Thinking is a Long Beach-based nonprofit founded in 2010 to create artful events that educate the public about HIV and breast cancer while raising funds to support those services. Since then, we have brought Long Beach 2 successful comedy nights with Paula Poundstone and the monthly film series Out at the Movies, which featured appearances by Lily Tomlin as well as others. Beneficiaries include the Woman to Woman campaign in Long Beach, the Christina Applegate Foundation, St. Mary's Hospital's CARE program, the AIDS Assistance Foundation, the AIDS Food Store. Contact us at info@artfulthinking.org. Thank you.
Welcome back to Long Beach Lens. I'm your host, Derek J. Simpson, and we've been having a great time speaking with Mónica Taher and covering everything from Getty Images, Latin America, to what you're doing as an entrepreneur. And you spoke specifically about just the importance of women and being in entrepreneurialism, and share more about what you think, why you think, rather, that's so important.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I have a thought. No woman should depend, financially speaking, should depend on a man or on a same-sex partner. I believe that we all need to be independent when it comes to, number one, managing personal finances, and also being on top of actually being careful with the fact that money should not control us. At the same time, that can translate into launching a business. And what better industry or area to launch it in than technology, which happens to be the future. I always advocate on behalf of women because there is so much going on in technology. We look at startups such as Facebook that it started with an idea, and it was a tiny, tiny startup that, as we all know, began in a college dorm, and it became the multi-billion-dollar company that it is right now. And those billion-dollar companies are called unicorns because there are not that many of them in the world.
Right.
And we have Twitter, and we have Instagram, for instance. The reality when it comes to women involved in tech is that there is a lack of us working in tech. And when I say tech or when I say positions or jobs, I'm referring to being a programmer, meaning writing code for online, basically. I'm referring to being an entrepreneur. I'm referring to even being a lawyer who focuses only on startups, on patenting tech startups, et cetera, et cetera. In fact, only 24% out of everybody working in tech are women. Wow. Only 24%. Now, if we analyze that 24%, only 3% happen to be Black and 2% Latinas. So that gives you an idea of still, even within that small percentage, who's still dominating, when it comes to women in tech. Right. At the same time, we have another big problem. Only 7% of all the funding, of all the investment, all the money that goes into a startup that is led by women, only 7% goes to those startups or to those businesses where a woman happens to be the CEO. So that basically means that 93% of all that money goes to startups that are led by men.
And that's a big statement when you go back to what you said originally, where technology is the fastest growing sector. And I know even in my career, technology has always been the delineating factor for corporate success.
Exactly.
Those who could ride that wave and be ahead of the curve in terms of technology, that's what led to many of the big bank mergers.
Exactly, absolutely.
Back in the early 90s as well. So you mentioned Long Beach too in our conversation. What can you share in terms of what that looks like here?
Well, there is a conundrum right now going on with Long Beach. There was a very insightful article in the Long Beach Business Journal that talked about the fact that the city of Long Beach happens to be in an interesting setting just because it's in between Orange County as well as LA. A lot of the money when it comes to funding goes to Silicon Beach. That's Santa Monica, Venice, that's where Snapchat is. Snapchat happens to be another unicorn company. And there are many, many startups in that area. There's another tech hub in Orange County, but not necessarily in Long Beach. Right. There are about 74 startups in the city of Long Beach, but only $10 million have been invested in these startups. And that gives you an idea that perhaps there is an intention by many entrepreneurs or by many people who actually want to launch a startup here in the city of Long Beach, which will propel to produce more jobs and more business opportunity for the city. But there's not a lot of investment, and that is a problem.
Now, I know that our mayor is really tech savvy and really wants us to be more of a leader in that area. From what you know and what you've observed about this industry, what would you say would be key steps that this city would need to take to really, propel itself forward in this whole tech society that we're in?
Absolutely. I think that we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We can look at what other cities such as Boston, Austin, even Silicon Beach, meaning LA, have done in order to propel this proliferation of startups. It comes down to education. Many people, when they hear the word tech, they think, oh, that means writing languages in the computer. No, it doesn't necessarily mean only that. What you're doing here in this studio is tech, because you're utilizing media as a tool in order to educate your viewers. And you're using streaming, meaning we're able to watch the show online, and that's technology. So it comes down to educating and perhaps creating programs, in this case the mayor, creating programs for especially for young people, for millennials, for Generation Z kids, so they can embrace technology. Some of them can be programmers, let's say programming classes, entrepreneurship classes, Money 101. There is something that I always say when I talk in the media, and that's the fact that we go to high school and we learn pre-calculus and we learn algebra and we learn all of these classes that we're never going to use on a daily basis. How come we couldn't get a class on technology or on Money 101, on how to open a 401k, because that's what's going to happen in the real world, but we're not being taught about that. So it comes down to education.
Now you talk about when we go back to your personal story, because I know you're writing a book or have written a book. It's in progress,
I'm writing,
right?
It's in progress.
Okay, and you talk about your story being one of resilience and courage. What have you learned about yourself in this whole process that you've been through?
I think there's a saying that goes something to the effect of when someone throws bricks at you, you use them in order to get up, something like that. And I think what I learned about myself after that experience in 2011, that by the way was absolutely horrific, just because I really didn't know if I was going to make it. And it wasn't just about me, it was about the fact that I have a daughter. It was just to see how resilient I was and how I was able to come back from the ashes, that nothing would stop me because I needed to keep fighting. And perhaps is a little bit strange to say, but I'm glad that I went through that, because if I hadn't, I wouldn't be sitting here today.
And when you say that, and when you think about what you've been through, Monica, and what would your words of advice be to other women out there who might be experiencing not necessarily the same thing, but a great challenge that they're not sure how they might overcome it? What would you say to them to give them, be encouraged?
I think I can say a few things. One of them is the fact that time heals and everything passes and nothing is forever. And it's just a matter of keep fighting and also educate yourself, read. Nowadays it's very easy to find information on the internet. Just click, and keep reading so you can come back from the ashes like I did.
And now, in all this clicking, one of the things I noticed I thought was interesting was you said a social disruptor.
Yes, exactly.
What does that mean?
So it's a tech term that you utilize in order to convey a change in the tradition, in what's called the traditional, either the traditional market or a traditional industry. I'll give you a perfect example. Uber has become a social disruptor when it comes to dismantling, if you will, the taxi industry. And everybody, I don't know anybody who doesn't use Uber. And you have your app and you get that car really quick and you don't really need a taxi anymore. So there are many there are many startups out there that are becoming social disruptors just because they're changing the status quo. They're changing the way we're living in.
Is there any particular sector that you see maybe the next disruptions may be occurring? Do you see some things on the horizon where it's percolating?
Yes, absolutely. There are many, but the one that is close to me, just because of the type of business that I do with Getty Images Latin America, is content that is generated by users. Meaning, all the photos, I'm assuming you have a Facebook page.
Yes.
Okay, I do too, and everybody in this studio most likely has a Facebook page. I have an Instagram page and many other social media networks, and all of us upload photos. So in a few years from now, people won't buy, or actually brands, companies won't buy stock photography, which is my core business right now. What they're going to do is that they're going to contact people like you and me and purchase our photos for a cheaper price and utilize that for their advertising campaigns. That's what's going to happen.
So I better get that 20 megapixel camera and get some better pictures.
Absolutely, you want to monetize on that, definitely.
Yes, but I mean, I guess that's a question too in terms of, you talk about entrepreneurialism, and I know I was, prior to this position, interim director of the Small Business Development Center, and sometimes people think that that's just this major step, and then they don't know quite which steps to take. with you, it just sounds like your passion just propelled you into doing this. Would you have advice to people who think they have a good idea but are not quite sure how to become an entrepreneur?
Well, actually, it's a question with many layers. I didn't go to business school. I have a master's degree from UCLA, but I majored in cinema and media studies, something that has nothing to do with business. Right. However, I was always very passionate about business. I remember when I was a little girl and my parents would buy me school supplies at the beginning of the year, I would sell them. And this was just me, you know, in elementary school, trying to make some extra money. But the truth is that anybody can become an entrepreneur. If you're at home and you're selling items on eBay or just, let's say, on Craigslist, you are an entrepreneur because you are supplementing your income with this that you're doing. Anybody can become an entrepreneur. What I do tell women is that if they want to become entrepreneurs, it would be a good idea for them to focus on tech because of two reasons. That's where the future is at, and number two, that's where the money is at.
Right, and I think that having people like you who sort of been there before them, that can speak to what some of the bumps in the road might be, so to speak, is a great asset, and also a great inspiration to see that no matter how hard you get knocked down, you can get back up and be, as you said, even more resilient, and you just take courage and passion, and there you are. You've been a great interview, and I really appreciate you joining us on Long Beach Lens, Monica. We're going to be looking forward to hearing more about Clip Yap, correct?
Absolutely, yes.
In the future, and other projects that you have, and we are also going to make sure that everyone knows how to get to your website to learn more about your story. Thank you so much for joining us. And that concludes our show. I'd like to thank Monica Taher for joining us today. Be sure that you follow PadNet TV on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for the latest updates. This show has been brought to you with support from the Long Beach Community Action Partnership. Thank you for watching Long Beach Lens.